Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. How wonderful to feel the presence of this community joining together through this exotic outreach called technology. How wonderful it is to have you here while we come together for the specific intent to share a Sunday message. And so I have a couple of special guests in the audience this morning, and welcome. I'm happy to have you here and lovely to feel the energy of other people. So let's just take a moment to bless this time. I just simply turn within and acknowledge that right here we create a sacred space because two or more of us have gathered with sacred intention. And therefore, I know that the presence of God, the wisdom of God, and the love of God is absolutely embracing us in every way, no matter where we are, receiving this gorgeous message, divinely inspired and given with great devotion from this minister. I say thank you, God. I bless this time, and so it is. Amen, amen. Well, I have a message this morning that is sort of a fun message. I have created something beautiful and lovely and fun to talk about. The title of my message is The Kaleidoscope of Truth. And most of us know what a kaleidoscope is. And we consider it a child's toy, but I want to just remind us that when we look at it with a gorgeous spiritual lesson that's embedded in the very idea of a kaleidoscope of truth, we are now looking through playful eyes that are non-judgmental, that are excited to see what's possible. So when you look inside a kaleidoscope, you're looking through a tube, and at the end of the tube there are mirrors and bits of glass or shiny plastic, and you turn it, and if you look toward a light and you twist the kaleidoscope at the same time, you get this gorgeous patterns of color and shape and designs. And so I think it's a beautiful, almost a simple way for us to find a useful message in the way that light refracts in our own lives when we're willing to take the pieces of our life and mix them together and put a little divinity in it. Then we have now a divine spin on what I want to talk about this morning. And I believe it's very relevant this morning because we're talking about light or divine light and the beautiful ways it can show up as we look at all the little individual pieces. And I want us to remember that no matter what kind of upheaval we may be moving through, individually in our private lives, our personal lives, or in the way that the world is moving through big stuff right now, that no upheaval has the power to cover up light. So let's remember that. There's something important in the lesson this morning, and I'll dive into it in deeper little perspectives as we move along. The best definition I found for kaleidoscope came from the dictionary, and it said this: a kaleidoscope is an instrument for seeing beautiful shapes, designs, symmetry. There are lots of ways of looking at how interesting life is when we shine a little light on all of that. That there are patterns that can teach us. That there are ways that colors come together that as an artist or as somebody dabbling in art, I would never even think of experimenting with. And yet life offers us countless varieties of expression. And we are a part of that great variety of expression in life. We, all of us, everyone listening, and even the people around the globe that are doing their own thing at this very moment, we are individualized in very unique ways. There are no two of us that are even closely similar to each other, because the patterns are deep in our DNA that require that we be individualized expressions. And yet, as vast and different as we are, the one thing we seem to have in common is that there's something unseen at the core of our being that calls us forward again and again. And so there's a reason we go to bed at night, we sleep, hopefully, we rest, we awake in the morning, and that invisible something in us calls us forward into life and the expression of it again and again. There's a perpetual motion. And I love thinking about what an extraordinary ability it demonstrates in the human spirit, that it doesn't seem to matter what life gives us, how we're challenged. The process of being challenged is the very process that stretches us. And ultimately, we all come to realize that in that stretching, we are also expanding our consciousness or our understanding of life in ways that we may not, some things don't make sense for years and years. And yet we are all blessed by this process. And in a perfect world, we can come to realize that we are also blessings. We are a great blessing. We bring our own gifts in all kinds of different ways to this thing called life. So everybody has their very own body, and then we have our friends and our family members, some that we chose, some that we didn't choose, and our life experience is about this kaleidoscope of truth, of light, and of love, and putting all those experiences together that show us the patterns of living. I was thinking while I was writing this material this week, I was thinking about Heidi Klum, who is one of the hosts on that great talent show, America's Got Talent. I love any kind of entertainment show like that where people share their gifts. Of course, we don't like all the gifts. Some of them are, I don't like the daredevil stuff as much as I love the talent, the singing and the children and dancing and what happens when you put a group of people together and they all learn the same routine, dance routine, and they complement each other. That really, for me, is a beautiful way to be immersed in this great configuration of talent and souls and gifts and the expression of those things. But Heidi Klum is a judge on that show, and she has this very interesting mannerism that she does, and it used to annoy me at first. For a long time it annoyed me. If there's an act on stage and she wants to get a better view, she makes her hand into a little tunnel and she puts it up to one eye and she covers the other eye, and she watches the act through this little tunnel that she's made. And one day they were all teasing her about it because she does it all the time, and she said, no, it really works. Try it. You can do it. So I'm going to invite you to do that right now. Take your hand. Those of you at home, you don't even have to worry. Nobody can see you looking silly. Take your hand and make a hole, and then put it up to one of your eyes, and either close that other eye or cover it. And now look around the room and see what you see. Just look around and see what you see. That's great, thanks. Drop your hands, you can relax again. What do you see when you do that? And the answer to that question is really quite simple. You see whatever you want to see. You are commanding your hand to make the tube, right? You're commanding one eye you're assisting one eye, and then you are looking through the tube so that now you are focusing on something small, and it does give a sense, I can see what she means. It gives a sense of a telescope, that you can see things better close up. And so I wanted to remind you today, by way of that little exercise, that you really do have your own telescope always right with you, because you can use your hand to make a tube and look through it. But more than that, you are your own kaleidoscope of truth. And so this is that part where I say, and I say it pretty frequently, I remind you that what we see is what we intend to look at, and that's where we are gifted with this gift of choice, where we get to focus on whatever it is that we want to look at, and we get to see I think by using this experiment, or even the illustration of the kaleidoscope, that when we shine light on the pieces of our life, or on point the kaleidoscope to a well-lit window, what we see is far more beautiful. In fact, it requires light. You can't use a kaleidoscope in the dark. It requires light in order for the mirrors to pick up the reflections on the pieces of glass inside. And so the same is true of our individual lives. So we can feel broken, we can feel fragmented, and lately I would say many people are expressing a feeling of sort of living under a haze, that there's this cloud, this sort of darkness, that heaviness, because we've been isolated for so long. We miss each other, and I believe that's a really good thing. I'm happy about that. But I don't like missing you. And so there's a haze, and I just wanted to remind us to turn on the light, to create some places in our life where we can see the sparkle of the pieces, and use that kaleidoscope of truth very intentionally. When we stand in the light, we begin a process of healing. Oh, that's a lovely, lovely thought. That there's healing in the light. That things have to come to the surface in order to be healed. And I do believe in many ways that's what we're seeing going on in the world. So it looks very messy, but there's a healing process happening. And we just want to keep reflecting the light on all of the pieces that don't make sense to us. While I have been thinking about these ideas of the pieces of light and or pieces of our lives and their relationship to light, I couldn't help but remember the way that they decorate the Buddhist temples in Southeast Asia. The Buddhist temples are many of the temples, not all of them, but they're covered in these mosaics, these beautiful color mosaics that have been created out of broken glass and broken pots and even broken pieces of mirror. And the way that process began, the story says that it was when the ships would be crossing the South Seas, and they would hit, go through storms or hit the really tumultuous waters and get bounced around a lot, that there would be a lot of breakage of all the glass items on the ships. And that the builders had this, in Southeast Asia, the creators of the temples had this vision that they could take those shards of glass and pottery and mirrors and put them together and create beautiful art out of it. And so what has happened is that they have lasted, and they have recreated the process so that now when you visit some of those temples and you see them from the outside, they change as the sun moves across the sky. Because the light, the gradations of light, create different reflections, and it's exquisitely beautiful to witness, though, the changing light across those little pieces of all kinds of different glass. I believe that as we apply these ideas into our own spiritual growth, using them as lessons and as metaphors, what we can see is that each of us, that in the experience of life, there's some broken pieces, and we can redefine that. As time passes, we can see that it's like hidden treasure, because sometimes they would pull up the broken glassware. If a ship would sink and they could get to that, they would they would gather the broken pieces off the bottom of the ocean. Now imagine how some of that glass is going to be smooth, depending on how long it's been under the movement of the water. And so our life is like that. We've weathered some storms. And what we understand is, as we age, if we're blessed and we pay attention, we begin to see the wisdom in those experiences. we get better at reflecting the light and seeing sort of the presence of God refracted into our experiences. I did a little work in old Judge Thomas Troward this week. What's that? I think I hear Reverend Cheryl saying amen. I think she's a little excited. Yeah, I pulled out a Thomas Troward this week, and I wanted to pull in a little bit of something from Troward and get his take on that idea of light and darkness and how we can use the light to understand our lives. And I was working in the book, The Law and the Word. And I found this perfect chapter where Troward is talking about the way light came to be. And he's actually suggesting that there's a tension between heaven and earth. What a profound idea. I've heard it slightly in other ways from other authors, but he's talking about this idea that there's a tension between heaven and earth, or the heavenly things and the worldly things, the things in physical form. And he says that it's a creative tension. It's a tension that is a source of all creative energy because it is the energy of all creation. Now, there's something important for us to think about here because Thomas Troward was a favorite of Dr. Ernest Holmes, who was the founder of the Science of Mind Teaching, or this philosophy called the religious science. This is the core of what Centers for Spiritual Living, this is our core teaching. And at one point, Holmes wrote that Troward is about 25% of our teaching. So Troward is this fabulous, complex person who really understood spiritual metaphysics in a profound way, did an excellent blend of science and spirit. And if you are interested in knowing more about Troward, you need to talk to Reverend Cheryl Hawkins because she's the authority here. You know who else is a Troward authority is Reverend Noli Hartwell. Both of these keenly studied ministers grew up on Troward, and I didn't have that experience. I wasn't blessed in that way, but I understand where Holmes took the works of Troward and created our entire methodology, the entire teaching of the symbol that's on the wall behind me, the teaching symbol, the creative process. That term comes out of Troward's work. So listen to this quote from Thomas Troward, where he is talking to us, trying to help us understand the way we wrestle with good and bad, the way we see evil or we don't understand inequalities or injustices that we see, and how we can make sense of that through these spiritual teachings. From the book, The Law and the Word, Troward says, there's a misunderstanding between two opposite principles, light and darkness. But it should be borne in mind that oppositeness of their nature does not mean conflict. Fascinating thought to consider. Oppositeness does not mean conflict. The two principles are not destructive. On the contrary, they are necessary correlations to one another. He's giving us a pause to now contemplate a new way of understanding wholeness. What does it mean when we say things are perfect, whole, and complete? Inclusive even. It includes everything in that whole. So I think that there's a great focus right now in the world, and even especially I might say in this country, on opposite opinions and ideas, on a strong focus on civil unrest and inequalities and things that are done unfairly. And what I want to say is that this is the way that we are calling things to the light. in order to be exposed to the divine process. That tension we're feeling, that all of us are feeling right now, is a part of that process as to how we bring light into the world and into our lives. So we don't want to gloss it over, but we certainly want to do our spiritual practice of meditating and contemplating sacred ideas and spending time in basking in that divine light, calling on that inner unseen way that we're called forward, calling on that wisdom within us for a greater sense of clarity on the wholeness of what's happening in the way that the world is changing now. Because this will be a great gift to lessen our fear, right? And also a great, tremendous call for us to all keep praying and affirming that greater truths are being born in this process. Now, Troward at this point goes on to say in that chapter, as he's talking about this creative energy of all creation, how light comes to be, he reminds us of that passage in the Bible where it says, "The light has come." Just sit with that for a moment. You don't even have to look for it. The light has come. I think in this sentence, we see that the light is always present. You know, that there is always light, even as there's day and night, the sun is shining somewhere on the globe. And so he reminds us of the words of Jesus where Jesus said, "The light has come, but there will always be those who prefer the darkness." And see, that kind of makes me laugh, because it's easy to think of the people that you in your own life have. It's probably a judgment, but all of us have certain people that we call downers. We don't want to hang around with them because they just don't make us feel good. They don't seem to be able to see the light and the joy in life, that they're always complaining or they're always, whatever. And a lot of us, when we discover positive thinking, we want to go change them and fix them and show them another way, but it doesn't work like that. We don't change unless we desire to change. And so I think when he says the light is here, the light has come, but there will always be people that prefer the darkness. Maybe there's a little hint there that we could leave them alone. I mean, don't you have days, seriously, don't you just have days where you want to hide away and kind of stay in your cave and feel safe for a little while? So maybe we can see that in a different way. But then he goes on and gives this profound quotation out of that chapter. Troward says, "Jesus said there will always be those who love darkness rather than light, but this cannot diminish the power of light." And so there's something heavy and powerful and good in reminding ourselves of these words. It's important to remember that truth itself, in the same way we have that invisible quality in us that calls us forward every day, kind of tugs at us and pulls us in that divine tautness, that there is a truth that desires to be present, and that true light will always disperse the darkness. It's predictable. It is as predictable as the way night turns to day, turns to night, turns to day, and it's an endless, perpetual, gorgeous, life-giving cycle. Even as we look for new life, we plant new life, the seed goes in the soil. We cover the seed and it stays in the dark until the shell is ready to open and it can sprout. It calls forward new life. The seed of human life is in the dark womb until it's ready to be born and present itself, until it's called forward into this new life. So bits of truth are everywhere, and I love thinking about to think about it as this kaleidoscope of truth that we can see when we intend to see it. Changing forms. life, as the day moves and the sun crosses the sky. Even if you have a skylight in or a high window in your home somewhere, you'll notice that it creates shadows that change and are interesting. I love the leafy shadows that come from the other side of a bush, where the light is bringing the movement of a bush and the life inside my home. I love that. So there's always these changing forms, that symmetry, that colorfulness, that movement of life based on the shards of truth that we choose to grab onto. And there's truth in all faiths. I'm reading this fabulous book. Of course, I probably don't need to tell you that. Reading a fabulous book by a Christian author named Brian McLaren. I think he's a minister. I forgot to look that part up. But he wrote this book. I bought it simply because the title was so cool. The title is something like Jesus, Mohammed, Moses, and Buddha. Oh, why did Jesus, Mohammed, Moses, and Buddha cross the street? That's the title of the book. So I bought the book, and the first chapter is fabulous, So he talks about how it kind of sounds like a riddle, and what we know about why did the chicken cross the street, it's like, well, it's a riddle, and there's no perfect answer, but it gives us an opportunity to have lots of different thoughts or funny end statements or whatever about it. I think it would be funnier if we started it like, so 4 holy dudes go into a bar. I know it's pretty irreverent, isn't it? But it gives me an opportunity to say this, because this is what I was thinking. If 4 holy dudes went into a bar and one of them was Jesus, Jesus would be ordering a glass of water, because he knew what to do with water. He knew how to work those miracles. Anyhow, I digress, as I often do. I love the idea of this book, because what it does is it calls us to ponder the possibility of these 4 great historical religious leaders who did not deem themselves religious leaders, but they were called to do something, and then their followers created religion around them. But I love that idea that they might get together and that they would just go for a walk. Because what that tells me is, like philosophical conversations or spiritual conversations with spiritual depth, they're all on fire for this way they want to be, big, blessed, inspired, grateful, big for God. They're on fire with this love of the Creator. And they see it in different ways. They see it through different kaleidoscopes of truth. So there's no arguing. There's no conflict. There could be conflict, but they're wise, brilliant, devoted spiritual seekers who, if we knew them, it's likely they would not stand before us and claim they knew it all. They would remind us of the qualities that we see in them that we have in us, and they would give us teachings so that we could tap into them and use them in a practical way in our own life. So they're walking. They're not condemning each other. They're not trying to convert each other. They are walking in a way that there is a collective wisdom. And the reason this excites me is because that's how this spiritual teaching was born. One very curious spiritual seeker who studied all sorts of religious and spiritual traditions throughout time, who studied philosophers and eventually psychology, and he took the wisdom, the tiny shards of truth in all of it, and put it together. He packaged it in a teaching we call the science of mind. This teaching was based on that wisdom of those 4 great teachers and others who could walk together peacefully, perhaps even in great humor, making jokes with each other, because the wisdom that each possessed was a piece of truth that they had polished and refined, and they really understood their piece well. And so we put it all together and we have something absolutely magnificent, because there is truth in every spiritual teaching. We have shards of truth in us. Each of us, when we stand in the light, when we turn the end of the kaleidoscope so that the mirrors reflect those tiny little pieces that we have gathered from those times in our life that have felt fragmented, we bring together, we pull together the immense wisdom of our own living. And when we sit together in spiritual community, something incredible happens. We begin to realize that I don't know more than you, even as the spiritual leader of this community, that you are as wise as I am, and that all of us, we're working with our own material. But given the way we unearth it and we bring it to the light, we share this divine wisdom. There's a collective wisdom that we are blessing each other with. And so what that means is when we have conflict with each other, sometimes that very tension we feel, that we may be tempted to consider a conflict, is really the birth of new light and of new understanding. I've given you a tool today. I didn't even give it to you, really. We just talked about it, but it's your hand. It's the way you can take your human, God-given hand, a piece of your gorgeous body, and you can make it into a circle and use it as a kaleidoscope, a way to focus on whatever it is you choose to focus on this day. And so the only thing we have to remember is to give it some light. Stand by a window or turn on a light at nighttime. The kaleidoscope won't work if you don't give it light. And that's what I wanted to say today. I think I would like to make it even more impactful by anchoring the words, the pieces of truth. Let's just anchor whatever gem you were able to grasp. We'll anchor it and let it be in the words of prayer. Julie, if you would step forward, please, and just see what I'm praying. I'm going to pray anyway. And so in this glorious moment, I just step into this place of basking in the light, recognizing the full truth of life itself, that there is a divine illumination. It is right here, right now. It is shining. It is illuminating. It is working from the inside out and from the outside in, and there is nothing lacking or missing in this presence of truth, of divine illumination. And so I know that there is indeed a healing going on this planet and in our individual and personal lives. And I know that it is absolutely perfect, that it is a force of love in this universe, and that as we bring our heaviness forward, as we carry it out, as we drag it if necessary out into the light, that we have this divine illumination and we can now see that there is more going on, that we are blessed and that we are a blessing, and that we are healed in our willingness to speak it, to set the intention of it, and we open ourselves to receive those blessings even now. And so we fill ourselves with this new awareness, with this new beautiful tool, a kaleidoscope of truth that we always have within us, that we can always access and use. I say thank you, God. Thank you, life. So grateful I am for all of this and for so much more. I release these words into the law, knowing it is absolutely done. And so it is. And so I am just grateful to know that even as I can't see whether or not we're connected anymore, that there is something divine pulling me forward, pulling life forward. I'm grabbing for my offering right now because I know it is in this way that we give that we give financially, that we keep the law of circulation working, and we keep this center beautiful and shiny and well lit and opulent in the divine blessings that it is to each and every one of us. Thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to see you again. Lots going on. Not quite ready to join together, but very soon. And I'll be speaking to that and writing about that. So check out the newsletter as well. I love you.